Joining me now is Miles Taylor, the former chief of staff for the Department of Homeland Security in the Trump administration. He is the executive director of the Renew America movement. Miles, it's great to have you. Thank you so much for making time for us this evening. Let's start with Buffalo. What was your reaction when you heard what happened in Buffalo?
Eamon, I'll be honest with you. It reminded me of something else that had a pretty profound effect on me a few years ago. You recall the mass shooting in El Paso, Texas. A shooter walked into a Walmart and killed or injured dozens of people. And in the wake of the attack, when they found his manifesto, he cited an invasion at the southern border as one of the reasons he conducted the attack. That was alarming for two reasons. One, just the naked racism behind the brutality. But two, the shooter echoed the same language we were seeing from Donald Trump in that time period. Now, I had already quit the administration in protest, but it was the type of thing we had been warning about for years, that this dangerous rhetoric was like a loaded gun for extremists. When I heard what happened in Buffalo, and very shortly after we got news of the attack, we started to get news about the shooter's motivations. It was a reminder that yet again, this extreme rhetoric from the party wasn't just resulting in extreme behavior among voters. It was resulting in violence and death and tragedy. And I spent the weekend thinking about that and thinking about really whether there was any utility in trying to stay inside the party to bring it back to the center, or whether this was evidence that it's just all gone too far, such that the Republican Party is irredeemable, which I think it is at this point.
So this irredeemable party, this, the party as you described it now, if this wing or if this fascist wing of the GOP continues to lead the party, what do you fear could happen in America generally in 2024 and in 2028 if they are, as expected, take control of the House in 2024, and who knows what happened, in 2022 and then in 2024 if they field a candidate who wins the White House?
Eamon, it's really tough to break through to people on this, because when people like you and I start to warn about where it could end up, or James Clyburn saying this could be autocracy, we are often written off as being hyperbolic. But I'm just going to tell you, from having lived inside this party most of my life, from having served two Republican presidents, still communicating with people on the inside of the party at the highest levels constantly, I am more alarmed than I've ever been. Folks who think that we defeated the pseudo-authoritarian threat within the GOP in 2020, when Donald Trump lost, are wrong. And they could not be more wrong. The threat is much greater today than it was in 20, than it was in 2016, because Trump and the phenomenon of Trumpism has morphed, matured, and metastasized within the Republican Party to the point that no one can reverse it. And I admire, Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger for still trying to fight the fight within the party. But what alarms me is that the base of the party has been now so completely radicalized. And again, folks will accuse us of hyperbole for saying that. But if you go look at the data, a majority or close to a majority of Republicans now believe the stolen election lie. They believe the QAnon core tenets, and they believe things like the racist great replacement theory. This is the core of the Republican Party. Polls show that they believe it. It will take a generation to excise this from the party. And my worry is that the longer the GOP base remains radicalized, the more violence we are going to see, the more uncivil rhetoric, and the more deterioration to our democratic foundations. That really is the worry. And I don't think James Clyburn is wrong in saying if that happens, it's a slow slide towards autocracy.
There's no doubt, Miles, that Donald Trump accelerated a lot of these turns that the Republican Party has taken. And I want to just hone in on something you wrote, which is in your piece, you write the party of Lincoln once stood on granite solid ground, promoting free minds, free markets, free people. And some of our viewers may be watching this and thinking, what time period are you referencing here? Because the 60s and 70s, this country saw the GOP fighting tooth and nail against civil rights. The 80s, the party sought to demonize LGBTQ people during the AIDS crisis. 2000s, you saw the party, it reveled in Islamophobia and then birtherism, which gave birth to Donald Trump and then ultimately to what we're seeing now. So when you look at the GOP over the last 40 years, when do you think this party was the party that you believed in and committed to?
Well, look, I mean, Eamon, this is a place where you and I are probably going to disagree. I'm a big fan of Ronald Reagan. I'm a big fan of George W. Bush, whose administration I served in. I think really good things happened in the party through various periods. But my worry isn't even that the GOP is regressing to the 50s, which a lot of people are saying the 1950s. I'm worried that the GOP in some ways is regressing to the 1850s. Now, I've been rereading the narrative of the life of Frederick Douglass, and it's almost eerie when you go back and you read writings from that time period about how even well-intentioned people were waltzing zombie-like into this racist American political environment. And no, we're not living in the 1850s in terms of the scourge of slavery, but boy, we've got a lot of people that are zombie-like in not waking up to the realization that racism has been weaponized in this country, and that we've got people radicalized by GOP rhetoric who are going and shooting black and brown people in grocery stores to carry out a political objective. Now, I spent most of my career doing counterterrorism. This is, by definition, terrorism. And the Republican Party is providing the ideological motivation that is radicalizing people to commit terrorist acts. Eamon, this is what we saw with the rise of al-Qaeda, with the rise of ISIS. I never in my life thought I would see that radicalizing rhetoric coming from my party, coming from the Republican Party, and resulting in the deaths of Americans on American soil. That is what we are witnessing, and it's not just a physical threat to Americans with the spike in domestic terror. Again, it's a threat to the foundations of our democracy, because the GOP is spreading this deeply illiberal view of what it means to be a democratic republic. That is giving me deep alarm, and I no longer think we can reform the GOP from within. We've got to counter it from without.
Let me ask you finally, if I can, why, and our viewers may be wondering this, why was this the final straw? Why was it the final straw to see what happened in Buffalo and say it's time for you to leave? Why was it not, for example, when Trump, tried to impose this complete ban on Muslims entering the United States, or the way he denigrated Mexicans and migrants, or his anti-Semitism? Why was this the moment that said, I'm out?
It's a fair question, and it would be a fair criticism. My response, though, is that perhaps naively, in that time period, I did not believe that Trump represented the core of the Republican Party. I didn't believe he represented the millions of good Americans who are centrist Republicans, and that he was the threat and that he had to be removed from office. It has become abundantly clear that it's no longer just about Trump, that there really is truly a radicalized base in the Republican Party. That is something I no longer think we can reform anywhere in the near term, and to defeat it, we've got to do it from outside the Republican Party. Look, it's not an easy decision to make, and no one's got to play the violin for me. But it's tough to change that part of your identity. But I would urge other Republicans out there to do the same thing. I hope people continue to leave in droves like they did after the January 6th insurrection. It's time to leave the GOP, go start something new, become an independent, join the Democrats if you agree with them. But the Republican Party is no longer a home to rational Republicans and concerned conservatives. In fact, in many ways, it is genuinely a threat to our public safety and national security.